We had a totally divided country for 8 years, and long before that, in all fairness to President Obama, long before President Obama, we have had a very divided. I didn't come along and divide this country. This country was seriously divided before I got here.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here with just a really quick update. In fact, this is just an update to precede this micro-documentary, which I intended to post on the day YouTube gave me a second unwarranted strike on my channel, which, unbeknownst to me at that moment in time, means that I can't upload a video for 2 weeks. So if you're watching this video, you're already aware of my backup channel, and I appreciate you subscribing to it. And guys, the other way to find the backup channel is to search for the previous video I made titled Divide, Conquer, and Terminate, which is all about this YouTube fascism and the divide and conquer strategy happening right now on YouTube. Divide, conquer, and terminate the alt media. Because again, if they can't get you to swallow their blue pills, they resort to this fascist censorship. So anyway, I just wanted to chime in and let you know this video should have been posted several days ago. Getting that second strike kind of took the wind out of my sails, and I sort of sidelined this video for a couple of days, just finally getting it done. I hope you get something out of it. It has some shocking information regarding Pizzagate and the history of these entrenched elite pedophiles and the dark, sinister deeds that they've been up to for so very long. So my thanks to all of you. A special thanks to my patrons over at patreon.com. You literally are keeping us in the game. Thank you so very much. And thank you to all of you for subscribing. Hopefully I'll be able to post on my main channel again shortly. That is, if YouTube doesn't give me a third unwarranted strike and remove my channel from existence altogether. Thanks for standing with me. God bless. It's a funny thing when a tipping point is reached. It can come quickly and with little warning. The year was 1994, and an evil company named Monsanto had just received FDA approval for its product RBGH, bovine growth hormone.
Why do we need a synthetic hormone to increase milk production when we already have a milk surplus?
And over the next decade, RBGH found its way into almost all milk across the country, something consumers didn't like, but it didn't seem like there was much we could do. Flash forward to the year 2008 when Monsanto was forced to offload its controversial milk hormone business because consumers refused to buy the milk, and what seemed impossible just a decade earlier was brought to fruition by we, the people. I share that reminder because we the people have power, and what seemed an inevitability just a decade ago to be ruled by the deep state forever has changed quite a bit in just the past 18 months.
What's happened, I think, is that the plot to really steal control of the United States for a long, long time away from any opponents of the Obama, Clinton, and dare I argue, Bush establishment machine, that plot, I think, effectively has now been stopped by Donald Trump and his people, who are now, I think, rather firmly in control, almost firmly in control of the environment in Washington, D.C.
That was investigator Charles Ortel in his recent interview with Jason Goodman. And here's an important tweet from actor James Woods. There is nothing more dangerous to the welfare of our republic than operatives from three-letter agencies taking sides for ideological and personal reasons and then using the vast resources at their disposal to damage and delegitimize those they oppose. Woods tweeted that along with an article from Fox News, FBI scandal bigger than Watergate? Could be, and of course it is. Donald J. Trump himself nailed it this past Sunday when he said, "I hereby demand, and will do so officially tomorrow, that the Department of Justice look into whether or not the FBI DOJ infiltrated and surveilled the Trump campaign for political purposes, and if any such demands or requests were made by people within the Obama administration." And then President Trump followed that up with this tweet, quoting Dan Bongino, John Brennan is panicking. He has disgraced himself. He has disgraced the country. He has disgraced the entire intelligence community. He is the one man who is largely responsible for the destruction of America's faith in the intelligence community and in some people at the top of the FBI. Brennan started this entire debacle about President Trump. We now know that Brennan had detailed knowledge of the phony dossier. He knows about the dossier. He denies knowledge of the dossier. He briefs the Gang of Eight on the Hill about the dossier, which then they used to start an investigation about Trump. It is that simple. This guy is the genesis of this whole debacle. This was a political hit job. This was not an intelligence investigation. Brennan has disgraced himself, and he's worried about staying out of jail. Dan Bongino. And getting back to that Jason Goodman interview with Charles Ortel, they were also joined by Ted Malloch, who said this.
I think the more that this becomes unearthed, we're going to see that the character who instigated this whole thing, who is involved at the center of the whole thing, that means helping the dossier, funding various parts of this conspiracy, and weaponizing intelligence, is none other than the former head of the CIA, John Brennan.
And so it goes. When we the people get fed up enough, we take action, we demand change, and in the case of bovine growth hormone, we merely stopped buying the milk, which is the exact same thing we should do here and now. Everybody needs to stop buying the BS coming from the mainstream media and the lefties that want to topple this president. And friends, it is those same lefties, those same Marxist, communist, ideological monsters who wanted to continue to bury all of the pedophilia and all of the child sex trafficking that's been going on for decades. And they thought Hillary was going to win, therefore allowing their crimes to go on unabated forever. And I was watching this video from McAllister TV on Monday, Q Mega Memes, Old Newspapers, Witchcraft, and Human Sacrifice. And in it is featured a spirit cooking people web. It's essentially a chart with Tony Podesta as the linchpin for so much corruption, including pedophilia. Now, one of the interesting things that Q has brought to the table is valuable information that Anons run with that leads us to people, places, and things. And one of the names in this chart was somebody I'd never heard of, Roger Took, noted in the chart as a violent pedophile. So a mere search of the name Roger Took produces this article from 2008. It appeared in The Spectator. Now remember, in 2008, precious few of us knew how widespread the problem was of pedophilia within governments around the world. Furthermore, none of us had heard of Pizzagate, Comet Ping Pong, James Alefantis, and probably at that point few of us were paying attention to people like John Podesta and Tony Podesta. And this story from July 9th, 2008 is so horrifying that I may omit certain words. But this is exactly what has been going on at the very highest levels of governments, both in the UK and the United States and around the world for decades. And it needs to be said because the only president that we've ever had that has vowed to purge the plague of child sex trafficking and human trafficking is President Trump. The story of Roger Took goes like this. The establishment pedophile, how a monster hid in high society. Roger Took was a pillar of academia with an enviable Chelsea address. He was also a vicious pedophile. Friends, as I read this first paragraph, I want you to think of people like Sir Edward Heath, who since his death has been named as being involved in the murder of 16 children. I want you to also think of Jimmy Savile, a vile, vile pedophile and child rapist, and also a necrophiliac who was close personal friends with Prince Charles and who was knighted by the Queen. And I want you to think of Sir Clement Freud, also knighted by the Queen, who spent years in high positions within the UK government. And it was his villa in Portugal, which is purported to be the villa that John and Tony Podesta were staying in when Madeleine McCann disappeared. Now back to this horrifying story, the establishment pedophile, how a monster hid in high society. The 5-year-old girl cowers naked and crying in a corner. She is so frightened that she urinates. One of the men in the room hits her repeatedly. The others laugh. Another man picks her up and throws her face down on the bed. Then the men rape her. She dies soon afterwards of atrocious injuries. This is the scenario that the respected art historian and curator Roger Took boasted repeatedly about in internet chat rooms to fellow pedophiles. Now friends, again, I want you to think of the businesses that James Alefantis is involved in. And I also want you to think of the Embassy and Art programs, which allows for the international transfer of quote-unquote live art specimens that are never checked by customs. Now back to this article. In the chat rooms, Took relates how a Dutch man, bought the child in Cambodia, kept her for a week, and how Tuk was part of a group who enjoyed splitting her apart one night. After Tuk was arrested last April, this was of course in 2008, the police interviewed him in connection with the child's murder, but Tuk insisted it was mere fantasy and the police passed the case on to Interpol. Fantasy it could be, but the fact that so many like-minded men laughed and masturbated over a helpless child's torture, terror, and death is chilling and profoundly disturbing. Roger Tuk was sentenced in February of 2008 to a minimum of 4.5 years in prison as part of an intermediate sentence for 17 other crimes relating to child abuse. They included molesting 2 of his step-granddaughters and the possession of 260 photographs, including 102 level 5s, which means they contain images of children being tortured or penetrated, including by animals. One photograph shows a penis entering the vagina of a baby, according to journalist Charlotte Metcalf. Many images showed small children shackled to chairs or bars in obvious pain. The police recovered these images from Tuk's laptop. Now, friends, I just want to take another moment away from this horrific article to remind you of James Alefantis' Jimmy Comet Instagram page, where some of the most incredibly damning things were posted, including this picture labeled by Working on My Night Cheese as #killroom. Now, I know you've all seen this, but I want you to think of Roger Tuk's crimes against children and the people he was involved with in committing these atrocities against children. As you look at this kill room, I want you to take a close look at the floor. Now, we've all seen the images that Tony Podesta is so fond of children hanging in tiled swimming pools. Of course, the first thing that comes to mind is child sex trafficking and the torture of children. As you look at this kill room, does it not look as though there have been pools of blood all over the floor, along the walls, and in the center of the room that have merely been wiped up? And as you reread these posts where Jimmy Comet, that's James Alefantis, says, "Oh yeah, this looks like fun," and Working on My Night Cheese says #killroom, and Niley Lawson says, "Just rinse it off when you're done," and Jimmy Comet responds #murder, I really want you to understand what we're dealing with here. And for me personally, it's a big victory to visit John Podesta's Twitter account. I'm shocked he hasn't shut it down at this point, because every time he opens his mouth, he is immediately attacked for being the Pizzagate pedophile and a world-class child sex slave op cover-upper, defending unspeakable dregs. These people have reached their tipping point, because the rest of us are awake, and whereas they once were able to carry out these dirty, despicable, evil, satanic deeds in darkness and in private, the tipping point has been reached, and the world is waking up to their crimes. So when Brina Freda writes on this Instagram post, "just a pile of money under a sheet," and when Sehoda writes #WWDJD, which according to Anon researchers probably refers to the strange artist Donald Judd, who was an American artist associated with minimalism, according to Wikipedia, whose specialty was these odd and massive concrete designs that certainly elicit thoughts of a kill room. Getting back to that article from The Spectator, the bottom line is these people are immensely sick and into some of the most Luciferian and satanic practices you can even imagine. Now, according to this article, also on Tuk's laptop were 742 chat logs of a sexual nature relating to children, adding up to over 1,500 pages. Tuk posed as dad of 2 super kids in the chat rooms, and pretending they were his daughters, posted photographs of his step-granddaughters, Grace, aged 9, and Jillian, aged 11, comparing their vaginas, inviting others in the chat room to masturbate over the images. Depravity exists, writes Charlotte Metcalf, and we are all aware that there are dangerous pedophiles at large. However, what is remarkable about Tuk's case is that his respectability and status blinded some who knew him to the true horrors of his crimes, just like Jimmy Savile, just like Sir Edward Heath, and, to an extent, protected him from the public outrage that normally follows the exposure of such appalling acts against children. Tuk's sentencing was followed by one UK Internet News report and a single paragraph in a side column of the Saturday edition of the Times. So, of course, the UK government made sure that this story was buried, just like they buried the crimes of Jimmy Savile while supporting him, and Sir Edward Heath while supporting him, and the former head of the MI6.
The pedophile who called himself Peter Henderson was in fact Sir Peter Telford Hayman. deputy head of the British Secret Service, MI6, one of the most powerful men in Britain. Heyman was caught with diaries full of sadistic sexual fantasies about children. But the spy chief was allowed to walk free.
Now, friends, I'll leave you with this. People like John and Tony Podesta and people like James Alefantis and people who are involved at the highest levels in these activities, people like Hillary Clinton, who came to the aid of Laura Silsby in Haiti after Silsby was caught at the border trying to traffic out 33 children. These people need to be brought to justice in the here and now. And I think that humanity is reaching its tipping point as it pertains to these heinous atrocities being committed by the world's elite. And when the tipping point is finally reached, these people won't be able to walk down the street. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check us out for real news at sgtreport.com. Also check out thephaser.com and thelibertymill.com, because there is one straight course, and that is to seek truth and pursue it steadily. George Washington. Thanks for listening. God bless.
We have a demonic force that is taking over humanity, redesigning us, creating something else other than what it is to be human. There is no prior period of change that remotely resembles what humanity is about to experience.